Thomas Pierce with the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, and I'm here with Ryan Fenwick, who's an attorney, to talk about cooperatives, general questions about cooperatives, and from legal perspective, what makes co-ops unique. So, Ryan, if you could just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how your work relates to cooperatives.
Good morning, Thomas. I'm Ryan Fenwick. I'm an attorney located in Louisville, Kentucky. I've worked with quite a few cooperatives here in town. I end up getting a lot of nonprofits, cooperatives, and kind of mission-driven limited liability companies here in Louisville. So it's really one of my favorite things to do as an attorney is work with people who are trying to set up something a little bit different and unique in the city.
Awesome, awesome. So, just starting out from a legal perspective, what makes co-ops unique?
Cooperatives are a very unique business structure because unlike other types of business entities that you might choose to be in Kentucky, a cooperative promises that it's going to have egalitarian decision making built built into the structure of it. What that means is if you're a member of a cooperative, you're going to be actually participating in the governance of that cooperative on the basis of one member, one vote. That's a lot different from the way other entities work because typically when you're going to be a part of a business, generally the amount of management or power or control that you have in that business entity is going to be based on how much you invest. A cooperative is made so that people can build wealth and can build autonomy in their own local economies. And when you set up a cooperative, you participate in this long and storied history that dates back, hundreds of years, that is set up to allow people to make the local economy work for themselves.
Gotcha. So you touched on this a little bit, but in a cooperative, how are decisions made and who ultimately has control in a cooperative?
In a cooperative, it's ultimately the members that have the control of a cooperative. What that means is the members are the people who set it up. Let's say that you are running a coffee shop cooperative. The way that makes the most sense to me for such a cooperative is that the baristas themselves and the people who are going to actually be doing the work in the cooperative, in this case, the coffee shop, come to you. And what they're doing is that they're agreeing that as a group, they are going to be making the decisions that govern how this coffee shop is made. So in addition to actually doing the work you would expect a barista to do, actually making the coffee, actually serving it, in addition to that, they're going to be meeting regularly so that they can make decisions such as how much are we going to pay ourselves? What kind of fiscal reserve are we going to keep to invest in the future of the coffee shop? So that's how decisions are made in a cooperative. Each member, by virtue of being a member, gets one vote in the major decisions of a cooperative.
Right. So when you talk about cooperatives, a lot of people talk about the advantages of co-ops. What are some of those advantages, especially from a legal perspective?
From a legal perspective, an advantage of a cooperative is you're starting against a backdrop that wants to help you create a fair business. The rules of a cooperative are built around making it so that you end up with a one person, one vote structure. What you hypothetically end up with in other businesses is it may be that you're an owner and it may be that you derive income from a business, but ultimately you probably have very little control of what it does. And that's almost the expectation with a limited liability company or with a corporation. And especially if you're just a shareholder in a large corporation, you'll see that you have absolutely nothing to do with how the decisions are being made for that corporation. In a cooperative, it's entirely different. Even in the very largest cooperatives, the members of that cooperative are actually voting on who's going to be on the board. So if the members of a cooperative don't like how the board is making decisions on their behalf, even in a very large cooperative, they're going to have the right to vote those people off the board and elect who they want. Now, you can achieve these kinds of structures with virtually any business entity. It can be written into the documents that found the business. But what's nice about a cooperative, especially when you work with the newer type of cooperative, the limited cooperative association, is you have a lot of these rules actually built into the statute that governs. So when you have these default provisions, it helps guarantee people's expectations and how the business is going to be run.
Right. So on the flip side of that, what are some of the limitations of cooperatives? What are some of the limitations of that structure?
I'm a huge fan of cooperatives, but I would definitely be quick to tell anyone that a cooperative is definitely not the right structure for absolutely every kind of business. There's a lot of instances where a person who has a brilliant business idea is going to find the cooperative structure to be overly limited for what their real intent is. So let's say that you are an optometrist. If you set up a cooperative with everyone in your office, you might find it limiting in the sense that you have this unique, you're the one person with this unique skill that can be done in the office. So a shared decision making structure where you're sharing the authority for what happens in that structure just might not be for everyone. It could be even clearer in an attorney's office where the bar association prohibits people who are not attorneys from making certain kinds of decisions. That would be another example where it would be impossible to share the broad decision-making authority that a cooperative guarantees with everyone, with everyone that might come together to form a business. Another reason you might not want to use a cooperative is because you have investors who are truly disinterested in the management of the business. Their interest is in providing financing. They don't want to run a business on a one person, one member vote. Another reason could be that what is being done is actually truly an altruistic purpose in the sense that there's no way to make a profit. A cooperative is entirely a for-profit entity. If you are not making money with your cooperative, then what you really need to do is set up a not-for-profit. And then you need to be able to deduct, and then you need to be able to provide the ability for your donors to deduct the money that they're donating to your business from their taxes. So those are some of the main reasons. Typically, the big reason that I see with people coming to me is their purpose is actually a not-for-profit purpose. So they actually need to set up a not-for-profit. A second thing that happens is that people, for whatever reason, are not wanting to share the business in the one person, one vote. And you could see if you're the one setting up the business, you could see why some people would be opposed. But despite that, a lot of people who set up cooperatives come with very high-minded ideals, and even though they might end up doing a lot of the legwork in the beginning, I think that my clients who have set up cooperatives have found the benefits of the more egalitarian shared decision-making structure very rewarding.
Yeah,
So yeah,
for
so
sure. Sorry, go
despite some
ahead.
of the disadvantages, this is my fault. Despite some of the disadvantages, I think the cooperative business structure is one that founders, when it's the appropriate type of business, it's one that founders truly enjoy running once it's up and going.
For sure. So kind of with that, you've talked about the founding documents of a co-op, and I'm wondering if you could kind of go into that more. What should bylaws address specifically for a co-op to be successful?
Bylaws are the ground rules of a cooperative. Ultimately, you could think of bylaws as the contract that the members of a cooperative are going to make with one another. So bylaws are something that a lot of businesses try to treat as a really cursory, as a really cursory kind of, like a red tape sort of affair. You find a lot of people, and you could understand why. I mean, you hate as an attorney just being a transaction cost when what people really want to do is get down to it and start providing, their great cooperative business that they have this wonderful idea to start. But the reality is, when you're setting up a cooperative, it's essential that you seriously think with your founding members, with the people setting up the cooperative, how are we really going to make this work? Because what happens is that when you're starting the cooperative, when everyone's excited about how it's going to go, that's when people are getting along the best. When you actually start running the cooperative, now 9 out of 10 times people get along extremely well when they're running a cooperative. Typically very high-minded people are attracted to the cooperative business model, and most of the time they get along very well. However, in virtually every cooperative, there does come a time when there'll be a member that needs to disaffiliate with the cooperative for one reason or another. So that, I would say, is one of the most important and most overlooked parts of what goes into a bylaw. Because if you think about it, you're starting a cooperative, you're excited about what you're going to start doing. You're not thinking about what might happen if somebody isn't getting along with the co-op. So that's really important. You have to provide for how you're going to get out of the co-op. You need to answer several other key questions, like what is someone going to do to become a member? Typically in a cooperative's bylaws, you're going to say that you have to fill out an application. That application has to be submitted to some kind of committee, and the cooperative has to agree by some margin that this person is admitted to the cooperative. And that's before they even pay the fee. Another important thing is you have to specify in the bylaws how the board of director makes the decisions. Is it even going to be the board of directors that makes the decision? Let's say you started a cooperative florist business. It may be that there's 7 people working in it, and every person may be equally a board member and equally a member. Now, if you're Ocean Spray and you have hundreds of farmers working together, you're obviously going to need a board of directors. That's something that's going to be written into the bylaws. Another important thing that's in the bylaws is that you have to discuss what percentage of votes, what margin has to carry on certain questions that are extremely important in the lifespan of a cooperative. For example, you wouldn't want it to be that 50% plus 1 vote gets you to merging the cooperative with another business, for example. Likewise, you wouldn't want to be able to expel a member by 50% plus 1 vote. Now, that's the basics of it, and that's what comes up for most people. But I think it would be a disservice to not discuss some of the reasons why you bring accountants and lawyers into the mix when you work on bylaws. What happens when various labor and when various tax issues come up is it becomes important to look at the bylaws and make sure that the way you're paying taxes and the way you're managing the cooperative actually matches the reality on the ground. So, without going into excruciating detail about that, what needs to happen is in the bylaws, members need to come to their attorney, and they need to come to their accountant, and they need to have prepared an idea of how they're going to get paid. Like how do they want to receive money from the cooperative? Is it going to be something that looks sort of like an hourly wage to an untrained eye, or is it going to be something that looks like a salary that comes out on a monthly basis? So once that's determined, you go to the professionals that are going to be working with your cooperative, and you want to make sure that you're drafting the cooperative bylaws in a way that first is matching the expectations of the members, because you really don't want your bylaws to be separate from how you're actually behaving. You want everyone in the cooperative to understand what the ground rules are. So you get this idea of how you want your cooperative to work, and then you go to your professionals and they make sure that you're not breaking labor laws such as hour and wage, that you're not violating workers' compensation law by not having workers' compensation insurance. And you want to make sure that you have an idea of how you're paying taxes, because it's going to be really important for the members to have a realistic expectation of what their tax obligation is going to be as they build wealth in the cooperative. It can be kind of tricky. It can be kind of tricky for people to understand that. And then it can be sort of tricky to make sure that you're doing your accounting through the year in a way that both matches the bylaws and matches the federal and state tax law that you're going to be complying with at the end, at the after your successful year, then you're going to be complying with tax law. And it's very important that your bylaws match the federal government's expectations in addition to your own.
Right. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit, just big picture. What are some issues that come up for those forming co-ops? I know you've talked about a lot of those, and then what are some common questions that you get about the cooperative structure?
The biggest issue that comes up for everyone who starts a cooperative is very down to earth. It's how are we going to pay for it? Where do we get the capital to start this? I think attorneys and accountants are not really as expensive as people imagine they are, but the capital costs of starting a cooperative, even if it's a rather modest cooperative, let's say you want to start a lawn care business, even the capital costs of that are something that it really does take a lot of careful reflection from founding members on how they plan to overcome the initial burden of just paying for the cooperative, for the startup costs. After that, a big issue that comes up is there's a real trade-off between, I guess, precision and speed as people are setting up their cooperative. What you really don't want to do is lead people through like a kind of never-ended, just protracted tunnel of meetings as you found the cooperative. You want to be getting to the part where you're doing business. So that can be a real issue, is kind of killing people by committee. I would say that once people are at the point where they're ready to enact bylaws, it's really pretty easy for people to come to agreements about the basics of it, because you've already made this radical decision. You're going to run this egalitarian business where you're going to be sharing decision making and you're not going to be trying to exploit anybody. So you've already made this radical decision. From there, it really is just details, but I mean, they are details that need to be addressed. So I think those are the biggest issues that come up with a cooperative. And I think they're pretty readily overcome, provided people have a reasonable plan for accessing startup capital.
So it really seems like having a good foundation and being careful about the groundwork that you lay is really going to set up co-op for success.
It's absolutely essential. Another related issue that comes up as people go along is, you understand, and you hate being the attorney, so while this might sound a little smug, it's what happens is that the actual business owners, as they're going along, like they're doing the important work, they're doing the day-to-day business of running this business. But what happens is you get this kind of institutional drift inside the cooperative where you started following the procedures you made in your bylaws and your foundational documents. But as time goes by, you might have kind of, just made little agreements with everyone, and there's no problem with that until there is, so what's important is that as people go along, it's important to periodically check, like, okay, is this what our bylaws say? Like, do our articles of incorporation allow this? Like, are we doing our accounting? Is our accounting being done like we agreed it was going to be done? It's those kind of details as you go along, doing the actual work of the cooperative that can, kind of steal your time later, if like little kind of inconsistencies crop up as you go along.
Gotcha. Well, this is all excellent information. We really appreciate your time, Ryan. Those are the questions that we have for now. But once again, thank you. And again, this is I'm Thomas from the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development. We hope that you've gained something from this video and from this information. Thank you.
Thank you.